Hello, we are still in our Incarnate series that we are looking at the arrival of Jesus in the Christmas event, and we are now in the New Testament. You listened to the devotion yesterday from John chapter 1. Today we're going to look at Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. Now here's the challenge to this. This is widely considered some of the most boring pieces of the New Testament, let alone the entire Bible. When I was in school and I was getting my master's degree, I took a class on the book of Matthew, and it was divided up into several different sections. And in each section, I was required to read about 250 to 500 pages specific to that section. And so to kick things off, we're looking at this passage in Matthew and Jesus' genealogy. And if there's one thing that's more boring than reading about all the begats, it's reading a 262-page book written in 1961 about the begats. Now look, I get it. This is not interesting stuff, but I want you to look at this passage today, and I want you to find interest. Um, it's super easy for us to say, nah, forget this is the boring stuff, but we also read in 2 Timothy 2:16 that all scripture is inspired or breathed on by God. And if that's true, that includes the begats. So look at this with renewed interest. Now, what's obvious from the prominence given these names at the opening of Matthew's gospel is that what we consider to be the most boring is, and the least interesting part of the entire Christmas story, was actually considered the most important to the original audience. See, genealogies become important to us at certain times of the year. There was an article a number of years ago by the Wall Street Journal tracing genealogies from those that came over on the Mayflower. And it says something like this, that 26 of the 102 people who traveled in the Mayflower across the Atlantic Ocean in 1620 celebrated the first Thanksgiving, had children who had children who had children. And so today, 12 generations later, the Mayflower passengers may well have had 25 million descendants, which means that there's a chance that you and I could be a direct descendant of those who came over the Mayflower. Now, regardless of how that might make you feel, in Jesus' day, one's pedigree was a source of tremendous pride, and in order to own land in Israel, you had to show in public documents your genealogy gave you a right to a piece of this Holy Land. And so they would have read this, and they would have seen Jesus' prominent stature supposedly in Israel. Not that his family line was of all of these great people outside of David, because there were certainly sinners, and there were certainly those who you might not want to mention were in your family line as you read this. But one of the interesting things that comes from all of this is throughout Jesus' entire life, he was criticized for so many things, but not once did anyone ever critique him or criticize him for the family in which he came from. Like, you could not tear him apart from the line of David. He fit the bill of this Messiah. And so here's what our takeaway is for this Christmas season. God's timing is penultimate. And so I want you to take some time today and just consider the timing that God has. That as we read in the end of this passage for us, so all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations. And from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations. And from the deportation to Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations. God's timing is impeccable. So consider God's timing today, and then I want you to consider how God's timing may be used through you to bless those during this Christmas season. You guys have a good read, good devotion, and have a blessed day. Talk to you soon.